Us, Will. It wasn't me.
Hi, we want to welcome each and every one of you today to our Global Chamber Author Series. My name is Dana Austin. I'll be the moderator for our incredible authors, speakers, and business owners today, where we'll be sharing with you tips, tricks, and processes for writing. I'm ecstatic as a writer's coach to be able to hear others' process, to be able to share and to glean, and also be able to pick up a few new books, which I have in the process. So I first want to acknowledge Doug Brunke, our CEO, who is on the line all the way from the West Coast, but we've got people on from everywhere around the world. And I also want to acknowledge Dwayne Canova. You're in the West Coast too, right, Dwayne?
I'm actually here in town in Phoenix because I have to be Doug's bodyguard. And,
Yeah, we have a big event later today. So Dwayne, are you going to be my bodyguard? Or are you?
Yeah, I'm your bodyguard again today. And they just see how little and mean I look, and it just of course, Doug is so tall and frail looking that you can see that he needs the.
Oh, now I'm getting tears.
Yeah, I don't see you as mean looking, but I'm sure you've got some other secret weapons. And yes, there is a special Global Chamber Summit coming up. I'm sure they'll talk about that. So Doug, would you like to open the call about what's coming up for Global Chamber, and then Dwayne share what's coming up for Global Chamber Author Series, and then we'll jump right on in.
So thank you, and looking forward to the conversation today. 4 amazing authors, and I'm assuming Tal has a book that he's coming, and I know that's coming, and also he's got some really great information about how to help authors. Dana being the other author besides our speakers. Really excited, and I'm sure we'll be inspired. One brief note now that Dwayne is on the line. I don't think I told Dwayne this, but I told maybe it was Lainey about this. And this maybe is it's a book story, Dwayne, and I'm sorry, you and I had pizza recently, and I drove away, and I got an urgent text from Dwayne saying, wait, you forgot the books. And he had some books for me. So he had his latest book. So we met in a Staples parking lot in Scottsdale, Arizona, and he gave me a stack of books, which I placed on the back seat, which ultimately made it onto the floor. And so I hadn't processed it, Dwayne, because of some issues. I couldn't get into my building in Thunderbird because I forgot my card, et cetera, et cetera. So I left it in the car, and my wife came in one day after shopping and used that car and said, what's all these crappy books on the floor? So underappreciated. All of the hard work and all the sweat and tears and all the knowledge and all the inspiration in these beautiful books. And yet someone without the full understanding, treats them so disrespectfully. So I hope all of you have had a much more positive experience with your books. Undoubtedly you do. All of us at the Global Tribe love you and respect you. And so we look forward to the conversation today. And Dwayne, I love you, and I look forward to meeting up with you this afternoon at the Innovation Summit.
You bet. You bet. Thank you.
Back to you, Dana.
I love the story.
So how do you recover from that? Because you realize you had a treasure in your car given to you by Dwayne from painstaking labor. And we'll talk about process and time for creating your masterpiece. And then someone uses an adjective crappy, and your heart just sinks because it took a lot of labor. However, we know it wasn't personal. I think it was ordered.
I hope she doesn't feel the same way about Cesar in my book coming out later. I hope there's a little bit more elevation to the process.
So I want to acknowledge Gloria Peterson, who actually started Global Chamber Author Series almost 2 years ago. I was there from the inception and excited to be able to see the progress. And there's several people on the line that's been a part of that journey. And Dwayne Canova is going to talk to us about what's coming up next. So I don't know if you want to do that now, Dwayne, or towards the end.
Why don't we wait toward the end, and that way people can kind of leave with that thought, if you don't mind. That would just be
That
terrific.
sounds good. Excellent. Okay, so if you're not speaking, the only thing I'll ask is just to mute yourselves, and then whenever you want to chat, feel free to unmute. So we have three incredible guests today on our panel. And as a moderator, I want to welcome Dr. Sarita Jackson, hailing to us from Los Angeles. I'd like to welcome Tal Zilberberg, hailing from Tel Aviv, Israel. And I'd like to welcome, where's my other speaker? Matt Sawyer, hailing from New York. And I am from Atlanta, Georgia, as the Executive Director for Global Chamber and the moderator. So I think I'm going to start with Matthew. Not only is he from my state of birth, but I think it's just a good segue based on his book. And then we'll have Dr. Sarita follow, and then Tal. Okay. All right. So being the author of your incredible book, right here, got it. Make It in America. All right. I want to ask you a few questions, but I do know from reading portions of your book and your history as your family coming over as immigrants from Eastern Europe, that really resonates with us here in Global Chamber, because we are a global group, a global tribe. And then when people want to do business in the United States, there's several knowledge gaps, there's obstacles, there's just a high learning curve. So I felt that from what I read of your book, that it really speaks to that. But I really want to ask you a little bit about what inspired you, not just so much from writing the book from the need, but from your ancestral background, your grandfather. Let's start with that.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to see friends and fellow authors here. I really recognize the need for the book. When I was doing some work for, in addition, I currently teach at Columbia University and NYU, and I also do consulting work on the side. And I was doing some work with a French company in 2016, and they tried to come into the US, and we helped them. They were struggling. We helped them. And then I did some other projects for the several of the European American Chambers of Commerce and some other folks. And I found that there was a real need in terms of having this, as you had mentioned, this knowledge gap, and companies and entrepreneurs struggle. So that was really the inspiration for it, is that, as you had mentioned, we're all immigrants. I came over, my grandfather came here from Eastern Europe and opened up a clothing store on the Canadian Vermont border and was successful. And, our country is built that way. And so that was, if I can give back and help other people, not only is it good for them, but it's really, integral in terms of our country, in terms of the maintaining the growth and employment,
vitality and financial solvency of our country too. Now, your grandfather, Louis Needleman, was well known for coming to as an immigrant and then starting this clothing company. But outside of that, he was also known for what he did in the community and the impact that he had, that they referred to him as a good citizen and always interested in the betterment of the community. And I feel like you're carrying on that legacy as well, Matthew, always interested in the betterment of the community for your work that you're doing as a professor at Columbia and New York, NYU, but also working with accelerator groups, consulting businesses that want to do business here, and thus this book. So right. I know that from coaching writers and also being an author as well, that writing a book is a journey. A lot of times people may have an idea, or they're the subject matter experts, such as yourself with marketing, as you teach to grad students. But this wasn't a one-year project. This wasn't a 2-year project. From what I've read, it started in 2016 when you started helping this French organization. So for someone that's just starting out and they want to write a book or they want to write another one, what would you tell them about the journey for writing your book? And yours is packed with a lot of research data as well.
Yeah. Well, it was really in terms of, I just recognized the need back in 2016 and then, going forward. But the process itself was, I started it in December of 2020. I had that was in the middle of COVID, and all my consulting work dried up, and the universities were enrollment was down, and so they cut back in terms of the number of courses I was teaching. So I had some extra time on my hand. So the first thing I did was that I got a contract from a publisher, because I didn't want to spend the time, if it wasn't going to become published. So I got that and put together that proposal, and that was in December of 2020. It took them about a month or so to get back to me. And then I started doing the research then, first doing quantitative research, and then I interviewed over 150 people in 40 different countries, in terms of putting this together. And all told, I just spent about 4 or 5 months doing research, and then about a year doing the writing. So I'd say it was about a year and a half of work on the book.
Okay. So about a year and a half, and you started at a time when you had more time during the COVID pandemic. From the inception, really, I think many people were able to realize dreams that they had put on hold or the back burner because they had other competing priorities. And then in December 2020 is when you started on this journey. And then in 2021, was it June or July that you initially wanted to release this book? And then it got moved to December. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm not sure. I had, in terms of so I had the publisher asked for, in terms of how long it was going to take. And I had no idea. So I said it would take me 6 months, and then they laughed at me. So, and then I ended up, putting a deadline for, July of 2021 is when I delivered the manuscript to them. And actually, I delivered it a little bit early to them.
Yes. Don't worry when they laugh at you, because they laugh at me when I say I'm going to coach my writers to complete their manuscript in 90 days, and they do it. So move through the laughter. We're telling those who are writing, move through the laughter, keep focus on what it is that you're targeting your goal is, as you have done, Matthew. And then your book released December 1st, 2022, correct?
Right. Yeah, that was just a month ago.
This is a treasure, guys. I have more questions for him, but I want to say, as global entrepreneurs, business owners, CEOs, this is great for doing business in America. Because what I've read is that some of the pitfalls and the obstacles that people wanting to do business in America is really lack of knowledge, right? Lack of knowledge, or some of the strategies. I don't really want to get into the book, but I want to get to the process. But you were able to meet a need, is the point that I'm making. You identified where the need was, the pain point, and then you found a solution. But I realized you didn't do this alone, because you had the backing and the support that really made this book a success. So who are some of the organizations, including university, that has supported you throughout this process to make this book become a reality? Because you do need an author's tribe. So this is what I'm really promoting here.
Right. Well, I did have, some folks who helped me just in terms of some other writers and authors who told me about their process. And one person in particular was a woman, Dory Clark, wrote her latest book is The Long Game. And I talked with her in terms of process, and I kind of followed her process, which was to first spend about, as I said, 4 months doing the research, and then doing an ugly first draft. And then from the ugly first draft, and then, refining it. What I ended up doing is I ended up looking at each chapter. Each chapter covers a different aspect. One's about finance, one's about legal, one's about market presence, another one about culture. I sort of treated each chapter as its own project. That's
I really I respect that too. And the culture part really speaks to me, and it resonates, because we doing business, I mean, even if you're doing business in the United States from one coast to another, there's variations in the culture. And I lived on the West Coast in Southern California for a few years, and it's very different than living on the East Coast. in Atlanta or in New York City. So having an appreciation and understanding on the variance of culture really makes a difference when you're doing business and just communicating. And your
Right.
book supports that nicely. So I'll ask you one other question before we'll entertain some questions from the audience. And there's so much I could go for, but I'm going to go with the pain points, speaking to the need of the audience. So you were in accelerators, you were in other chambers, and more importantly, you had students and other business people that were coming to you as a consultant saying, I need help. You know, we've been in the United States doing business and we haven't been successful, or our customer base hasn't grown, and they needed to know how to scale, but more importantly, how to market and then scale or rebrand in some instances. So you had one, Francis Simovitz, that says, help foreign entrepreneurs to know what they don't know. So how did you gather that information to compile in your book? I know it's in here and I read it, but I'm just asking for the sake of my audience, because when you want to do a book on this nature, you have to do a lot of research and gather information, and also have a reach in a database. So who was your database source and how did you gather information?
Right. So to start off in terms of understanding what, or identifying what people wanted to know. So I did quantitative research to find out in terms of what was the knowledge gaps, where did they feel that, what did they most wanted to know about, what were they felt was competencies that they needed to have. And so based on that, for example, in terms of understanding the visa and the legal system, that was, something that was brought up, or understanding in terms of cultural aspects of it. So that was sort of, I put together the outline of the framework based on what the audience, the reader, needed to know. And then based on that, then I addressed each one through, there's some chapters where I had 40 or 50 different references, whether it's books, I found the US government, had a lot of, really good information. There was a great website called USA Facts, which was a tremendous in terms of getting at and having access to all of the information that was out there available. So
okay, excellent. Thank you, Matthew. And just to clarify, you chose to go with a traditional publishing versus self-publishing or a hybrid. And if anyone has questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and we'll entertain a few of those right now before we go on to our next author. So who has our first question?
Elise?
Okay, Elise, feel free to unmute yourself and
Yeah.
ask away.
Hi, Matthew. Thank you for that book. I haven't read it, but I find the subject infinitely fascinating, having lived in 5 countries over 27 years. So my question to you is, how have you differentiated the various groups, or haven't you differentiated the various groups that come here to do business in America? Because each has their own cultural norm, background, societal.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So have you or haven't you differentiated from those groups?
Well, actually, I used, it's a good question. I used a lot in terms of, I did a lot of work with the Hofstede Institute, which is Finland. And so I was very fortunate to work with some folks there who gave me access to all of their data. And I don't know if people are familiar with it, but Hofstede started back in like 1960s, 1970s, putting together the first cultural comparisons, and then has kept that up over the last 30 or 40 years, looking at those differences and keeping it. So I use that as sort of my facts. And so I tried to be as factual as possible. I think a lot of it, I sort of tried to take myself out of it because I come with so many biases.
Right.
So I didn't want my friends to say to me, well, how do you mean we're so like impatient, or how do we mean we only care about this? So I tried to, use that fact base and then from there, then tried to then saying, okay, well, what are the implications of that? And then I had a case study. Each chapter has a case study of a company that deals with how they address that particular issue. And so that's how I approach that.
Excellent. Thank you, Elise, for your question. And I don't see any of the hands raised, and I don't see any of the questions in the chat. So I want to thank you, Matthew, for sharing your process for writing and some of the way and resources that you gathered, data and facts. And thank you for putting in the Hofstadter Institute there. So if you would put your link for your book in the chat so people can easily find you or locate you on LinkedIn. And next up, I've enjoyed this journey of just picking up books and reading, but this is such a good marriage made in heaven, these two books together. I say get them both. So our next speaker is Dr. Sarita Jackson. She is a professor, she's a business owner, she's phenomenal as well, and she's the author of International Trade and Services. So here is her book. And she is on the West Coast, so she's quite early with the rest of our West Coasters. And her book is International Trade and Services, speaks to several things that you want to consider when doing business abroad or business here and factors. There's a few of the chapters that I touched on that I will ask about. But before I get into that, what I'd like to ask you, Dr. Jackson, is what was the impetus for you writing this book? And I know you've done a lot of work with government, international organizations, and so forth, but share that with us, please.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, welcome everyone. I'm so glad to be here. So thank you for having me. Well, my story is similar to Matthew's actually. Goes back to 2 years prior in 2014, which I describe a little bit in the book, where I just moved back to Los Angeles to start my company, Global Research Institute of International Trade. So I started attending a number of workshops and talks about international trade. And the whole focus of many of these talks were to talk about the opportunities for businesses, particularly small, mid-sized companies, about the opportunities in the global market for the US companies. And I noticed that most of the focus was on goods, manufactured goods or agricultural commodities, but mostly manufactured goods. And I stood up and I asked the question, I said, well, I understand that you're talking about international trade broadly, but what about services? There are a number of service providers, such as myself. That's how I got into international trade from a practical perspective, providing services around the world in the Southern African region, throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. And I do speak Spanish, so English and Spanish. And so when I asked that question, I remember it was one of the ladies from the Department of Commerce that said, we don't have that information. We haven't measured it. And as I continued in this space in Los Angeles, being contracted to give workshops, as well as teaching courses at UCLA Extension on international trade, people started coming up to me because I would incorporate information about, if you're a service provider, this is what you need to know as well. So as they came up to me, they started expressing the interest in learning more about exporting a service, importing, or mainly exporting a service for that matter, exporting a particular service, and how do they get started? And being a professor, not having anything that I could share, any written material. I mean, there's written material, but it's more technical and on the policy side of things, what's going on at the World Trade Organization, but something that is practical and accessible to someone looking to get started. And that's where the light bulb went off. Okay, rather than waiting for someone else to do it, this is where I can come in that I know firsthand exporting a service myself. And let's put this into a simple, practical guide.
We want to thank you for doing that, for compiling it, so it make it easier for those who wanted to do business and service and trade. They can find it here in one book, one resource. I want to talk to you about branding, and perhaps I should have touched on Matthew with that because he's the master marketer, but I'm going to talk to you about branding, if you don't mind. Two things. First, I love the name of your business, GRIT, the an acronym, GRIT. With a strong background in research, clinical research myself, there's so many acronyms, but this one, when I think of GRIT for your business, for Global Research Institute or International Trade, automatically I think of someone just kind of digging in their heels to get it done. They're persevering. So the name in itself represents that. What's the most important part about branding when it comes to your book and the platforms in which you advertise across? Because that's very vital.
Great, thank you. Well, first of all, your description is the emotion that I hope to evoke when people see my background. And it was very intentional when I came up with the name, the Global Research Institute of International Trade. Being a business owner, as many of us know, that you do need that persistence and determination. But especially when it comes to international trade, it can be challenging, but it can also be done. And so with the whole idea behind GRIT, as I say, GRIT with two eyes, it's the same mindset that even to export, as I will say sometimes in meetings, to export, it requires persistence, determination, and grit with two eyes. Grit, to have that fortitude, but also to think about the research that is required, because that's one of the things, regardless of the sector, that a lot of companies avoid is the in-depth planning and the research necessary to determine what is the right market. When I get to that, when I've selected that market, what are the things that I really need to know about that market, as opposed to doing trading, exporting, or selling a good or service internationally in an ad hoc fashion, coming up with a systematic way of doing that so that you can save your money and be very competitive over the long term and increase your revenue in those markets over the long term.
Yes. I tell you, you see the common thread that links Matthew and Sarita, and it's going to nicely knit together with Tal. This panel is phenomenal. We're not done yet, though. So when you're branding your book and you look for the competitiveness, you also look for a target audience. Who's your niche for this book? What's important, I should say, about branding across platforms? And I bring that up because even when I'm coaching my writers, I stress the importance of that. But from your perspective as an educator, but also as an author and business owner, what's the importance of branding? Because our audience needs to hear this, because it's vital to your success and for people finding you.
Well, so for me, and I want to make sure your question, across different platforms, for example, the social media, different platforms. So for me, the first step, because in that, this is very research focused and things like that, it was really narrowing down that audience. Mm-hmm. So when I'm branding myself, it's okay, before I can even start putting out marketing messages, it's making sure I have the right audience on those platforms. That was where I had to backtrack, because I can put out a lot of messages all I want, but if it's not the right audience. So for me, and I'll just admit, the main platform that really works for me is LinkedIn. I have all of the other social media platforms, or even being in person, but making sure I reach that right audience. So small businesses, mid-sized companies, could be larger companies, but mostly speaking to the SME community. And then in relation to the book, the service providers. And when I say service providers, professional service providers, it can be consulting, legal services, financial services, anyone in travel, tourism, hospitality, logistics for that matter. So really getting that right audience and then tailoring the message to that audience and being very, very consistent with the branding, the message, as well as consistent in terms of communicating with them, communicating that message. So yes.
Absolutely. Finding her audience, and her audience is quite broad, but it's specific within those groups, right? Hospitality, service, finding it, targeting, and making the message clear. Thank you for clarifying that too. Now, yesterday, if any of you were on, I know some of you were on the call with Angela Dunns for Global Chamber, Globinar, and it was on LinkedIn and optimization. And I tell you, if you didn't have a chance to be on yesterday, you'll definitely want to listen to per Globinar, the questions that were asked, and optimizing your LinkedIn and just making it clear. I'm not going to attempt to even repeat what she said, but I will share one tip from there because we're talking about branding. So making sure your headline is clear to capture and bring your audience in on LinkedIn. And that would be the same across other platforms and websites, etc. So this one particular chapter that I wanted to, or at least section I want to ask you a few questions on is about finance and insurance on this aspect of the book. So you mentioned here that for international trade, finance and insurance really plays a key role. So I'm getting into the book a little bit because I think this is essential to discuss a little bit. Can you expound on that some? And then I have a few comments I'd like to add afterwards.
Okay, so with that section at the earlier part of the book, talking about just kind of the role of some of these industries, finance and insurance specifically being one of those, historically, how they have played such a role in international trade and their role in allowing for the movement of goods. And that's where I feel that there's such a gap that we talk about goods moving, but here are these services that allow for goods to move, agricultural commodities. And in that section, that's where I'm talking about for anyone that is providing any kind of financial services, insurance services, when goods are moved, you need to insure those goods against any kind of damage, loss, or theft. That's very, very important because you don't know what's going to happen once you put that have that container on a ship. Anything can happen. So that's where insurance becomes very, very important. On the financial side, broadly speaking, looking at banking services, how the banking system is very, very international. So if you are trying to finance a transaction and make sure that transaction is secure, in other words, in simplest terms, make sure you get paid. You get paid or you receive your good. That's where between an exporter and an importer, they will go through banks and have letters of credit. That's one example of showing the international side of the banking system or financial services to allow for goods to move. That's number one. Number two, the other area that I'm just going to add to that is also as an exporter, understanding some of the financial services that are available to you to get some financing or to offer credit, insurance to a buyer in an overseas market, to really understand all of these different facets within the internet and within the financial services that can help your business to grow, or if you are in that space, being able to advise companies and advise them from a financial perspective on how they can access financial resources, access capital, so that they can grow their businesses and expand globally.
Yes, absolutely. I bet one group of companies, I think it was the East Indian Tea Company out of England, I bet they wish they had insured the tea before sending it on to Boston, because that was a huge loss, as we all know. And the only reason, I just have to throw this in there, the only reason that coffee became popular in the United States is because they no longer had access to tea for quite some time. So tea remains the second most consumed beverage in the world. Insure your products, right? One thing I did learn, there's a lot of terminology in your book that's not familiar to me, unfamiliar to me, and the bill of exchange being one. So bartering, you talked about that, and then you talk about bill of exchange and then other lines of credit to ensure the products that's being shipped. So that's something that was new to me, but I want to also just touch on this a little bit, even though it seems to be uncomfortable at times, but even during the slave trade, they ensured those that were actually captured from countries, particularly the continent of Africa, and then transported to the United States and the Caribbean and part of South America as far as the slave trade. But at some point, they were no longer insuring these commodities, these human beings. So how did they protect their assets? And what are some things that you would recommend in cases where they can no longer insure a product? How do you protect your own product?
So in terms of the particular case that you mentioned, because it was, and you're right, it was a topic that I could not avoid. When you're looking historically, we also had human beings that were considered commodities and were being traded. And regardless, it may be uncomfortable, but it is a fact. That's a part of the history and some of this insurance that we saw even in that particular case. Now, to your question in terms of, well, what should we do now if a product cannot be insured? Well, that's not, pretty much your product can be insured there. So you would not encounter that. It's just a matter of making sure that you understand what types of insurance are required. And that's where working with a freight forwarder that I mentioned in there, some of the other types of services, but working with the freight forwarder to make sure that you understand what are all of the documents that you need and the types of insurance that you need when you put that cargo on a ship. And then also another area, and this gets a tad bit technical, terms of sale between an exporter and importer to determine, well, who is actually going to be responsible for that risk? Where does the risk fall between those two parties? So there wouldn't be a case where you cannot insure. It's just a matter of understanding the type of insurance that you need for what it is that you are doing.
So you are our great expert, so we will be coming to you for this. And one final question just about your writing process for this book. And I know this is one of 2 books that you actually have published. And what has been your process for writing this book? If you could kind of share that with us, kind of wrapping up this segment, and then we'll entertain some questions.
Okay. Well, so I also followed the traditional publishing route. Had presented a proposal to a publisher. They had reached out to me and asked if because they knew me from reviewing some other books. And I said, yeah, sure, I do have an idea in mind, presented a proposal, it was accepted. And once the writing process actually began, which was the end of 2019, and then when the pandemic hit, similar to Matthew, then not having to move around as much allowed me to just sit and focus and write. Nonetheless, that can go either way. Discipline is very, very important. It could be I have too much time on my hands. I don't know what to do with myself. But in that, this was something that's a lifestyle for me anyway, writing. And as you mentioned, this is the second book. It was a matter of really setting a solid schedule. I did work on it 7 days a week. And I always had a set time frame first thing in the morning when I got up that I would work on the book. And then, if I had more time later in the day or even at night, great. But nonetheless, no matter what happens after 9 o'clock in the morning, my time, I know that I've put in that time to write and then break it down into smaller pieces so that I'm not overwhelmed, similar to Matthew on this chapter. But even this chapter, what is it that I want to accomplish each week? Because as I tell people, similar to working on my dissertation, kind of the doctoral model that I use, and journalism, where you have set deadlines. But if you lose a day, you lose a week, you lose a week, you lose a month, you lose a month, you lose the whole year. So I was on it just a set amount of time, 7 days a week, until I met that deadline set by the publisher.
Yes. One of my favorite quotes, Dr. Jackson, is start with the end in mind. And I don't just apply it to desserts, but I do apply it also to writing. Start with the end in mind. If your goal is to complete this in 90 days, 6 months, or have it published within a year, work backwards from that date. And you setting a daily schedule, a set time, is something I certainly recommend and advise during coaching writings. However, I do know in one of our conversations, you told me that on one particular Saturday, you sat down for 4 hours straight. So I'm going to just give a little tidbit. Here's one point that I want to share. The Pomodoro method for time management also works for writing. 25 minutes writing, 5 minutes break. take that and run with it. You can do it 4 times and then you take a 15-minute break. It allows your body physically to have increased circulation and movement. So you're not just sitting down or even standing up on your doing your typing or wherever you may be. 25 minutes on, 5 minutes break, Pomodoro, because it allows you to be, get clarity. Your creativity increases. As a matter of fact, when those 5 minutes are up, you'll come back and you'll be more refreshed and ready to go. So this has been incredible. I have some questions that are here that I'd like to ask of you, Dr. Sarita. And if anyone else has questions of her, please feel to raise your hand under the reactions, and then we'll call on you next. Can you share with us your perspective on international supply chain issues? And what are things importers and exporters need to be aware of? And this is from Alex Devereux.
Okay. So great. With regard to the supply chain issues, well, one thing, at least it has gotten a lot better with regard to the supply chain. I do talk about that a little bit in the book when we talk about digital technology and the role of technology in advancing the supply chain or making it much more efficient and transparent. So that's my perspective with looking at the role of these technologies so that we don't have, some of the bottlenecks that we saw up until, well, now 2 years ago, where we really were at a crisis with the supply chain. And I'm sorry, and the latter part of the question?
The latter part of the question is, what are some things importers and exporters need to be aware of?
So the main thing when it comes to the importers and the exporters are, and this is an issue that I deal with a lot, of course, financial resources available to them. Okay, so I guess I have 3 things: the financial resources available to them, also the opportunities, the ease of access to markets through free trade agreements or trade agreements, trade programs that gets overlooked a lot. And that's one of the things that I really push for companies so that you can enter a market without so many, high taxes placed on your goods, or when you're importing, taxes placed on those goods that's increasing your cost of doing business. And then also understanding the regulations. That is very, very important. And during the pandemic, even though I was writing the book, business really took off. I had more clients. So it went in a different direction where more clients were coming to me. And that was the main issue that they were dealing with regard to understanding the regulations as it pertains to their particular products, so that their products aren't held at customs or they face any expensive fines, things of that nature. So financial resources, trade agreements, and understanding regulations.
Yes. And ensuring them, right? We have one final question for you that I'll ask, and this is from one of my incredible deputy directors here in Atlanta, Nicole Floyd Turner. She says, for those of us who have been self-publishing or indie publishers, what is the process of reaching out to traditional publishers to pitch your book? So you have done that. Matthew has done that. So I'm going to ask him to unmute to speak to this after you, please.
Mm-hmm. So in my particular case, it was, and I'm even thinking with the first book, it was really asking people who had published, had gone the traditional route, finding out if they knew an editor or something like that, versus just kind of sending a cold email or cold calling, asking if they knew someone who that I could pitch the proposal to. And that makes that process that much easier. Now, as I mentioned earlier with the second book, the way that they found out about me was because I teach international trade courses, and there is a textbook that I use in my course, and they needed someone to review this because the authors were trying to update their textbook. So I reviewed it, gave feedback. And in that process, there was a question of, do you have a book proposal or a book idea? And I checked that off, and that's how I got connected with the right editor for my particular project. And then from there, the proposal phase, the approval, negotiating the contract, setting the deadline. And even in that, working with an editor, that was very important to me, who will also look at the project as I write throughout the process, versus I go through all of this, submit it, and then, we're not sure. Following me through the process so that when it was done, I knew it will get published.
Absolutely. So you got that. She reached out to those who have published using traditional publishing and asked them for connection in their process. And we have right here in this room an incredible group of authors, some who are indie and some who are traditional. So reach out to your global tribe first. I've done independent self-publishing, so I would be more the one for self. But we have a whole host here, Dwayne, Gloria, Lainey, several others that can be support. Matthew, would you speak to that real quick before we go on to our next speaker?
Sure. Well, I got a warm introduction. There are a lot of professors who get published through Wiley, so that I went through Wiley. I guess the secret is in addition to having that connection, putting together a very strong proposal. They asked for a proposal, which included things like, who the competitors are, who's the market, how are you going to market it? It's sort of funny for me because as a marketing person, it was like a marketing document. And so it was really easy for me. But putting together a really strong proposal is really important too.
Excellent. So is it safe to say, Matthew, that we can reach out to you as well and maybe get some thoughts on how to even put together a proposal or maybe do that part of the Global Author Series? Just a thought.
Well, there is a format, at least through Wiley. They had a particular format that they asked me to put it into. So it was really, it was following their format because they're used to seeing, it's like a resume, if people are used to seeing in, a certain type of format, and to try to introduce something that's not what they're used to creates problems. So that's what, find out what the format that the publisher wants and then follow their outline.
Absolutely. Sounds like
Can
a
I
master
just
class
add
in the
to that?
making. Sure.
Quickly, and it was the same with Routledge. That's a very important point. 2 points that Matthew made, because when I put together the proposal, I felt like it was a marketing plan for the book. But then, each publisher has their specific format and questions. And then they also want to see if you have a following. That's where the social media platforms become very, very helpful. Do you have a following that you've built over time that you can market the book to? And I was able to say that and provide the numbers for the different platforms.
Excellent. Excellent. So that following speaks to the optimization Globinar yesterday. So if someone had asked for it, Cesar would be the one to provide that to you. And so thank you both for sharing your process. And you'll find the link in the chat to order this book and also Dr. Sarita's other book. So we have another speaker on our panel tonight coming all the way from Tel Aviv. He was one of the first executive directors I remember meeting from overseas, along with Katie, and I just fell in love with his heart for service, his business savvy, and then I have soon learned that he's also a black belt in karate. So walk light when you meet him. None other than Tal Zilberberg. We want to welcome you, Tal, to our Global Chamber Author Series. And even though you're not speaking as an author, we're talking about marketing today. We're talking about positioning your book in the right place and how people can find you. So your business, one of your businesses with the e-card, really does it nicely. So welcome. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and what's the latest in our Global Chamber Tel Aviv.
Okay, so hi everyone, and thank you for inviting me. And as Dana mentioned, I'm the executive director in the Global Chamber Tel Aviv, and I'm also the co-owner and CEO for Green Book USA, which is a software company that specialized in innovative products. We're not coming to replace digital assets that already exist, like Facebook or social media or website, but we create products that helps to enhance those digital assets. And if you don't have those, it can easily replace them with a cost-effective option. So what we do, we develop several products that help you to share virally your information instead of sharing numerous social media links, Facebook link, website links. We contain and actually wrap all those in one place, which is very, very user-friendly, especially to mobiles. And in one click of a button, you can share or go to the specific links that you want. For example, instead of going through Amazon and looking for the link, you can easily click and go directly to the payment page, because in marketing, everybody knows that as many the clicks are, the less chance that people will actually buy. It doesn't matter if it's in any products that you want to sell, especially with the bombarded of options of digital media and social media platforms that people are losing themselves. And the thing is, you're investing a lot of effort to bring people to your website, to your social media, but they have a lot of things that distract them, and a lot of temptation to click on other things. So what we do in our product, and I will show you immediately, that we are taking everything and making it compact in one place. And you don't have to be digital, because people are usually overwhelmed with digital and they're being digital phobic. And this actually, and this
I didn't know there
actually,
was a term, but I guess I have that
I,
digital phobia too.
I just made it. I don't know if it's a proper English, I'm sorry, but I'm improvising. So so what it offers, even for people that are not used to use digital platforms, it gives them a visual, and it's reduce the avoidance of using the platforms. What I want to show you, I will share the screen.
As
Yeah,
you get
okay.
ready to share your screen, go ahead. I want to just ask a question of the audience. How many of you heard the word, "This will help you go viral"? Hopefully you heard that when he presented. And also one click versus 3 or 4. So anything that reduces the clickability to access and to find you and your products makes your life easier, makes your marketing easier, gives you more time back in your day so you can work on another Pomodoro, a 25-minute writing session. Have at it, Tel.
Okay, so what you can see here, it looks like a website, but it's on the phone. In one click, you can see all the details, the contact details. My phone number, my email. If I have 2 emails, even I have one for the Global Chamber Tel Aviv, one for the my other email. I can save it to contacts in one click. If you click on this plus button from your phone, it's immediately download a file that you can actually import to your contact. And in iPhones, it's immediately placing all the contact list into your phones, or all the contact details. You can share it very easily via all platforms: Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, WhatsApp, text messages, emails, and it can connect to your website. So if I click here, I'm going directly to my website. This is specifically the Global Chamber website. Okay. You can also have one-touch dial, so I don't need to punch the keys, especially if you're driving. Don't text and drive. And you can place in here a short description instead of going out. When you're going to a website, let's say that you want to go to a website, even the responsive websites are not leaving you in the same page. Either you need to scroll a lot or you need to go to another page. So this is keep you in the same page. And I can pinpoint, if you have a website, we don't want to replace it because we want all the traffic into one place. So we can pinpoint to inner pages. So for example, I want people to join me. And if they're going to the Global Chamber, they need to go through several clicks. So what I did, I place a join link, but it's going directly to Global Chamber Tel Aviv with the payment page, as you can see here. This is directly to Global Chamber Tel Aviv. You don't need, even my email is over here. You don't need to go and then look for the enrollment page. So it can do the same thing, and we will do it in a few seconds. Of course, you can have some photos, you can have videos, and there is a QR code. If I will open this QR code, you can even scan it from your computer and it will pop up in your phones. We do also have something that we developed. if you are using WhatsApp, and I'm assuming that most of you are, even in the States, it's just something that came and started to increase in the last year. We developed a quick WhatsApp. A quick WhatsApp, because when you want to send somebody a WhatsApp, you need first to save them to contacts, or use a special app for this, which is making everything very heavy. So we developed a specific module in the e-card. So all you need to do is just place somebody's phone with the country code, and you can send them your e-card without the need to save them to your contacts. So this, if somebody uses WhatsApp and is a marketing tool, WhatsApp is an amazing, and it's developing, especially in groups. We use the Global Chamber group in WhatsApp. Everything is really, really easy. Another thing that we have here hold on just one second. I'm going to reduce, okay. All our social media. I have my LinkedIn connected. I have my Facebook connected. Sometimes you're placing your name, or your domain name is taken in LinkedIn. So people doesn't know how to search for you. Or if you have a common family name and you don't know how to, people are wasting time, and sometimes they are just losing interest until they find your link. So this is connecting directly to your social media and enhancing it. As you can see.
Excellent.
Here.
I do
Okay,
have a few questions while you're showing us this too, Tal.
Okay.
So this is not an application, so you don't have to download an app at all. This is more of a platform, correct?
Exactly. This is a platform. We do have apps in our company. We're creating an amazing apps, very innovative, but people are avoiding from downloading apps and giving permission on their phone. They're really anxious to their privacy, and they're right. So this is a web page platform. It's not a website, but it's a web-based platform. And here you can see it's, although it's in Hebrew, but for example, a singer, which is like an author, they are artists. Everybody that write a book, I think that you can actually call them an artist, because they're sharing something from their knowledge or their abilities. And immediately you can go to Spotify, for example, or to YouTube, and you don't need to search for those kind of things. To create the e-card is really easy. You have a platform that we supply when you enroll. And I will open just to show you how visual it is. If I'm opening an e-card, I can immediately see everything that I'm doing. So I can have a design. If I want a special template, I can do a special template. If I don't want a template, I can also put my own background. I can place a header. If I don't have a logo, let's say that our people doesn't have a logo, you can create your own logo with few simple steps. Everything that you write. So for example, let's do for quick, as I promised to Dana, I want to quick create Dana's logo, and I can upload Dana's picture. And all I need to do, immediately you can see, next step, and then I'm just placing the logo. And I have Dana's logo, of course. Okay.
Glad I'm the
and
guinea pig today.
Yeah, of course I can make it bigger and do whatever, and also border it, but I don't want to take much of the time. So once I'm finishing it, I can add social networks, just copy and paste. And everything that you're doing here, for example, I want to take Dana's LinkedIn. I'm placing it in the LinkedIn, and immediately you can see the LinkedIn icon over here. So you don't need to be techie. You don't need to be to understand. You just need to follow step by step, and that's it. So if I'm placing Instagram, immediately the Instagram icon. If I want to put personal information, I can put personal information. Here I'm going to change it to Dana, and you can see where it's going to be. Usually in digital platforms, it's very hard to imagine how can it be. And of course, you can place pictures and galleries, but everything is really easy to use, and I don't want to take much of the time with it.
Okay.
And Also, I took Dana's link to Amazon, although it's in Hebrew, but as you can see, this is immediately the payment page, and I can copy the payment page, okay, and just place here in the links, order now.
This is amazing.
And
this is
now
addressed.
immediately you can go and click and share it on every platform. And of course, you can customize it. So let's think, for example, if you have an Etsy shop, sometimes you want to change the name of the Etsy website. And this is causing the links to change. So you don't need to start sharing it, just changing the link over here and you update it and that's it.
Let me ask a question real quick too, Tal, just for the sake of time, and Elise is going to give our book review in about a few seconds. So 2 questions. Payment. Someone says, how do you put various forms of payment like Venmo, Zelle, and so forth? And I think you demonstrated that with Etsy, like you put the link for Etsy and likewise for Amazon.
For Amazon.
Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And I want to just show you how we netted all of this together, because you have books that you're writing or you're going to write. You got to market it. That's the key to your success. And what I teach my writers is, when do you start marketing your book? The day you decide to write it. You don't wait till it's finished. You start talking about it, engaging, and so forth. So Tal, please share the link here. And I do know for Global Chamber members, he does have a special rate, especially if you have more than one e-card. In my case, I'm going to start with the Dana Austin Speak and then one for Global Chamber as well. All right. And I'm a one-click person. If I can click one and get there, I'm a one-click wonder. 2 at the max. If I've got to click 3, you lose me, and not just myself, but many other people. So want to thank you, Tal. Put the link in here, follow him and what's going on in his chamber in Tel Aviv. And Elise is a part of the Austin Global Chamber. And I'm so delighted that she has agreed to do a review of one of our authors' books. And if you have other questions for Tal, please put it in the chat and he'll be able to address those right as we're finishing. So Elise, the time is yours.
Okay, hi. Hi, everyone. I did a written review of Todd Cornell's book, The Heart of China, How Mindfulness Changed My Life. And the reason I'm saying the subtitle is because the last time that I did a review, he reminded me that I wasn't exactly that mindful because I forgot the subtitle. But this is a wonderful book for academics, interested business parties who want to do business with China, or individuals that are interested in learning about the ancient and traditional ways of mindfulness, various things from I Ching to other, sorry, I'm just reading a little something, to ancient knowledge for modern society. I found the book extremely engaging because I am a Japanophile, but also I do like and I'm interested in China. So if you want a detailed view, Todd has lived and worked in China. He is a fluent Mandarin speaker, writer, and reader of Mandarin. So he's coming from this angle of in-person and Occidental person in the Orient, which is really quite rare. And he has that multiple ability as a business advisor, as a individual who's lived in China, and also as a mindfulness expert, because I believe he was with some Buddhist monks or met these type of people.
Sure.
He's giving you advice on how to change your thoughts, how to notice your bodily sensations, and in depth. So that's sort of it.
Thank you for that quick summary of your overview. Now, whenever we write books, we do want feedback and reviews. So at least sharing hers here is one place, but also going to the platform where they'll be read and also tallied is important. So I want to thank each and every one of our speakers today, our authors today, Matthew, Sarita, and Tal, and for Elise for also going to do the review. So we're going to let Dwayne close it out with telling us what's coming up next.
Yes, it's going to be one of our really fun sessions next week. We have a lady by the name of Kirsty Wilkinson. She's from Australia, down under, you know, and she's going to bring thunder from down under. But she is a lady with a disability, and to kind of adjust what she's done is she's become an exceptional golfer. And I don't know how many of you play golf, but playing golf without a physical disability is difficult, but she's really championed herself. She's now plays golf in tournaments really around the world. And she's going to write a book that's really meant for the coffee table. And in that book, she's going to get advice from Elise on how to go through a book, because she's going to have interviews. So there'll be the interaction between Kirsty and Elise. And then Kirsty is going to interview a young lady who has become an incredibly accomplished golfer around the world with a disability. She's here in the Phoenix market, the Arizona market, by the name of Amy Bockerstedt. And of course, Joe was on the screen here with us for a while. And Amy is Joe's daughter. Actually, Joe is Amy's dad. That's really the way he now has changed it. And she's exceptional. She's just an exceptional person. She has a little tagline that's gone viral around the world. She's literally a worldwide personality locally here. And so Kirsty is going to interview her as a part of the working process of how to write the book. And so it's going to be a nice working session for us. And it's just going to be exceptional. We're all going to leave extra pumped up. So thank you all. Look forward to seeing you all next week.
Thank you all. And I don't know why I want to do namaste, but I just have the feeling to do that as we close out for this part. And wish you the best of the rest of your day. Be sure to engage in upcoming summit with Global Chamber today. Find out what time it is, your time zone, and sign up for the next author series. Thank you, Gloria, Doug, Cesar, Dwayne, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dana.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Tal.
Great job.
Bye-bye, Doug.